Hello everyone, and welcome to the Hillbilly Files. My name is Leo, for those of you who don't know, and I will be your humble hillbilly host today as we take you guys for a little ride on the Wayback Train to yesteryear. We have an unusual story for you as usual. As you guys know, we like to do a little bit of investigating. We like to do a little bit of research. We like to look for old lost sites, old historic places, people, things, and you never know what it could be. You never know. We could be looking for just about anything. Over the years I think we found treasure. We found a jar of coins buried in the woods behind Evelance Hatfield's house. I would call that treasure. Burned wood on Randall McCoy's property where his house was. That's part of Randall's house. I would call that treasure too. Quite a few other things. Mass graves from the 1918 Spanish flu epidemic. A lost to history. People, places, all but lost to history. Just maybe a little newspaper article here or there. Well, today's story is one of those. Today I'm in Phelps, Kentucky, just past the school. The school's right down here. And I'm at an old cemetery. Actually, it's a little sign right here. It's called George Dodson Cemetery Road, as a matter of fact. And it's right up here. And I came over here once before looking for someone else who was not here, unfortunately, for me. I wound up, it turned out to be a really long day. But we did find some interesting information. As most of you know, we document most of the places that we go, document the graves for family, for descendants, piece old stories together, that sort of thing. Well, we got to looking, and we found a very interesting story here at this one. So I've came back over here today to introduce you guys to a couple people and tell you about an old story that has pretty much slipped through the cracks like a lot of the rest of them. But anyway, I just wanted to kind of touch base, before we headed up and back into the, if y'all been watching the channel, there's always a hill that has to be climbed. Of course, it's southern Appalachia, eastern Kentucky, West Virginia, everything, I crossed two hills going to the bathroom from the living room. So I guess that's pretty much going to be a given, right? But anyway, like I said, we did find some very interesting information here. And while I'm here, I'm going to go ahead. The other time I was here, I didn't have time because, like I said, I was looking for someone. And I didn't really have the time to actually document the cemetery and all of this stuff and find out for definitively who is here and that sort of thing. So I'll be doing all that today. And like I always say, we always leave a really wide breadcrumb trail so that descendants, can someday find their grandmother, their whatever the case may be, lost or, wrong information, the wrong location. This was not actually, it's listed as being here, but it's not. It's over here. It's in this completely different graveyard, and just all sorts of things like that. And you never know what you're going to run into. How many times, if you're watching the channel for a while, how many times have I said, you never know who you're going to meet in a graveyard? They're just like that. But anyway, I guess I'm going to grab my backpack and head on up into the hills here and get on up there. This one isn't too bad. It's not too awful high. Some are considerably higher altitude and horrifically overgrown, especially this time of year. We've had a really hot summer. It's been, baking temperatures, and climbing mountains and baking hot temperatures do not go well together. It's like ice cream and pickles. It don't work. You know, once it gets hot, you have to kind of back off just a little bit until it gets cool. And then when it gets cool, you can go do your mountain goat thing again and just start climbing stuff. But luckily this one isn't too high. We don't have to break out the mountain goat skills on this one. But anyway, I guess now that we all know what we're doing, sort of, we're all on the same page here, I guess it's time to grab my backpack and head on up the mountain. And as Paul Harvey used to say on the radio, come back with the rest of the story. Okay, well, I have made my way up the hill and obviously found the old cemetery in question, which, like I said, I had visited this once before. It's been a couple months, whatever, that I came up looking for someone else and did not find them, but I did find the cemetery. And, you know, that led to one thing after another, Heather's research, and here we are. But I did find the one that we're looking for right here. Dave Coleman, born October 26, 1903, died August 13th, 1933. Now, I'm just going to kind of get comfortable right here beside and tell you guys a little story. Since the ground's nice and dry now, the rain's gone, you can actually sit down graveside and tell you a story. But like I said, now today I am it's the George B. Dodson Cemetery in Phelps, Kentucky. And at first glance, it looks just like any other quiet mountain cemetery, but nearly a century ago, a silly little decision in a pool hall in Freeburn, Kentucky would set in motion a chain of events that people in Pike County talked about for years. Now, before we begin, this story is also related to me. One of the men involved, little Dave here, was my first cousin twice removed through my mother's side of the family. We share the same grandparents, Daniel Boone Coleman and Mary Dodson. And of course, I'm also related to the Dodson family buried here in this cemetery, giving me family connections to both the Colemans and Dodson families. This is probably, though, the first time this story has been talked about in nearly a century. But when it happened, it was a very big deal. Newspapers covered it, people throughout the area talked about it, and whole families' lives were changed forever. Time has a way of hiding everything. Stories that once made news headlines slowly fade away until one day they're almost forgotten. When we looked through this old cemetery, we found far too many early deaths, tragedies, and even murders involving the families that are buried here. There are many stories waiting to be told here, but today we're going to focus on just one of them, and I will document the cemetery after we tell you this story. On Saturday, August 13th in 1932, and a minor argument reportedly broke out inside a pool hall operated by Cain Dodson in Freeburn, Kentucky. The newspaper article never explained exactly what started the disagreement between 24-year-old Neely Hatfield and 28-year-old little Dave Coleman. Whatever was said inside that pool hall in Freeburn was enough to bring their tempers to a boiling point. Fortunately, at least for the moment, it appeared that the trouble had ended. Those who knew them believed they had settled their differences and were simply going their separate ways. Wanting to make sure that nothing else happened, George Dodson offered to drive little Dave home. Little Dave climbed into the back of the rear rumble seat of the car. Now, I'm sure a lot of y'all know what I'm talking about. Old cars back in the 30s, they had a little flip-up seat in the back. It was called the rumble seat. Some people called it the mother-in-law seat. But that's what he jumped into the rumble seat in the back end of the car. For reasons that were never fully explained, Neely climbed onto the running board of the car as it pulled away. The car supposedly traveled about a mile before Neely suddenly jumped from the running board. Now, according to what the newspapers described as the most common version of events, Neely ran into a nearby house, grabbed a shotgun, and ran back toward the car. When he got back, witnesses said Neely raised the shotgun and fired, hitting little Dave Coleman squarely in the chest, point blank. At nearly the same time, little Dave reportedly fired his pistol. Within a matter of seconds, both men lay mortally wounded and dying beside the road over a minor disagreement in a pool hall. The newspaper reported that both Neely and little Dave died instantly, but the story didn't end there. Only days after the shooting, another version of the events began to circulate. According to that version, Neely had indeed fired the fatal shotgun blast that killed little Dave, but little Dave may not have fired the shot that killed Neely. The newspaper carefully pointed out that his version had not been confirmed and acknowledged that the reports reaching its office had conflicted. Even in 1932, no one could say with certainty exactly what had happened during those final moments. The newspaper also reported that both men had been drinking before the confrontation. Like, that's not, how common is that, right? One fact, however, never changed in both stories. Both men lost their lives that day over a silly argument in a pool hall. Now, I remember back in the younger days when there used to be pool halls. I can remember a disagreement or two, but it never quite got to that point. But little Dave here, he was the son of James Lewis Coleman and Mary Eliza May. He was listed as a farmer, married to Octavia Dodson, and I'll show you her right here in a second. She's right beside of him. Together, they had 3 children. Neely was the son of William Hatfield and Vicey Blankenship, and was also a lifelong resident of Freeburn, Kentucky. He worked as a coal miner and was survived by 3 brothers. What's interesting, though, is that while working on this video, we unexpectedly made another discovery. It appears that Neely's father, William Hatfield, or Billy, as he was known by friends and family, was also killed in a shootout in 1920. That's actually a separate story we've been working on for one of our viewers. We had no idea that the 2 stories would end up crossing paths, but here we are anyway. Funeral services for Neely were conducted at 10 o'clock Monday morning at Sand Siding, West Virginia by Reverend Jesse Dodson before he was buried there. It's hard not to think about how quickly an argument inside a pool hall can turn into a local tragedy. No one won the argument in the pool hall. Now, nearly a century later, the arguments, whatever it was that they argued about, has long been forgotten. As a result of the story of the argument between little Dave Coleman and a man named Neely. I did say I would show you Octavia right here And here's the rest of some family right here. This is Octavia right here. And I'm sure there's a lot more family all over. Anyway, guys, like I said, thank you for coming along and hearing our little story. I hope you enjoyed. And, you know, kind of keep the people in mind. As, you know, we always say, you know, you kind of, in a way, in a strange way, people sort of die twice. You know, you die once when you physically die, when your body dies. But you die again when your memory dies as well. When your name is never spoken again. When you are completely forgotten by all of history, civilization. You're lost. You're gone. You're forgotten forever. So that's the good thing about doing our videos and doing our stories. You get to bring back a lot of these old stories and places and legends. In a way I kind of see us like treasure hunters. You know, not always gold and silver that treasure hunters look for. Anyway, guys, we'll see y'all next time on the next episode of the Hillbilly Files. Until then, y'all have a really good day, and Leo out.